Good evening, and thank you for joining us for NCEA's Catholic Identity in the Math Classroom webinar. My name is Kate Reich, and I am the organizer for today's event. Before we begin, please know that all of your microphone connections have been muted. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please send those through the question box that appears in your GoToWebinar panel. To ask a question, please use your mouse and click into the blank box area, type your question using your keyboard, and then click Send. The webinar presentation will last 45 minutes, and any questions that you have asked will be addressed in the remaining time. Later this evening, you will receive an email asking you to complete a brief evaluation about this webinar, as well as information about creating a certificate of attendance. I thank you in advance for providing us with feedback about today's webinar. We will also be sending you a different email with instructions on accessing this recorded webinar and presentation files in another business day or two. We wish to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for their generous support of this webinar that is an extended offering to the NCEA Common Core math workshops that took place in the summer of 2013. Now I am very happy to introduce Matt Hollowell, Dean of Academics at Cardinal Ritter High School. Matt has much to share with us this evening, so please welcome Matt and say hello.
All right, thank you very much, Kate, and welcome to everybody out there that's participating in this webinar. Hopefully you're having a good evening. My name is Matt Hollowell. I'm a math teacher here at Cardinal Ritter High School in Indianapolis. We experienced a record low today in Indianapolis, and I guess as many of you experienced the same thing as well, so hopefully you're staying warm, and thanks for joining us. I have some contact information there. If you're on social media, on Twitter, feel free to give me a follow. I'll follow you back, and we can dialogue that way. I'd be more than happy to. And my email is also provided there as well. Email away anything you have, comments or questions or things you'd like to share. I think this is something that's important and something very worthwhile in dialoguing about, so please take advantage of that. But we'll begin with this Catholic Identity in the Math Classroom webinar and just kind of talk about some of the things that we're going to do today. The objectives, I just kind of want to go through. I have four kind of main objectives, and the first one is really just, I think most people on this webinar here because they already believe this, but we're going to just briefly touch on, what are the reasons for doing this, for actually incorporating Catholic identity. You yourself as a webinar participant probably are on board with this already, but if you're a department chair or you're an administrator or maybe you're co-teaching with somebody, maybe they don't share the same enthusiasm that you share with the Catholic identity component of lessons. So we'll get into that for sure. The second thing is we'll look at how to actually integrate Catholic identity into the math lesson, not just real quick force that in and then jump back to the math, because that's not authentic, and that's not what we're looking to do. So we'll kind of emphasize this integration of Catholic identity versus just kind of the one-stop deal. The third objective is we'll actually take a look at a couple lesson plans that do integrate Catholic identity and math content together, and at the end I have a resource slide that will show you a couple of good resources, but one in particular from NCEA that will be just an awesome resource, and we'll share that with you. And then the last is just talk about also assessment strategies. If Catholic identity is an important thing, then obviously assessment is a huge piece of our classrooms. Catholic identity needs to show up in assessments as well. So those are kind of our four main objectives for what we're going to cover today. I would like to start with a prayer. This particular prayer is written by St. Thomas Aquinas. I was looking for a prayer to use for my class at the beginning of the school year. It's kind of, pray it every couple of weeks or once or twice a week, and just to get the students familiar with it, maybe something they're not used to hearing. It's a great prayer. I've only taken a couple of the paragraphs from the prayer, but if you could just join me briefly here as we pray this prayer for students, which is honestly what this entire thing is about, is benefiting them. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Creator of all things, true source of light and wisdom, origin of all being, Graciously let a ray of your light penetrate the darkness of my understanding. Point out the beginning, direct the progress, and help in the completion. I ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I'd like to start this by just addressing a couple of misconceptions that I had as a first-year teacher. I'm in my 10th year teaching here at Cardinal Ritter High School, and as a first-year teacher, I wasn't fully on board with the Catholic identity component of my classroom. I just want to share a few of these with you, and maybe you have them still, or you had them at one point, or you know people in your building that have these. The first kind of misconception I was operating under was the fact that I'm a math teacher, and we have really good religion teachers that do that. They teach religion, and they're the ones that are responsible for teaching that Catholic faith and making lessons about this and assessments. Students come to my classroom to get the math, and then they go to the science classrooms to get the science and so forth. And I felt like it was easy to kind of punt that duty to the religion teachers, and certainly you can probably agree with that sentiment at some level, or maybe you did at one point. The second kind of misconception I had was that my last religion class was in high school when I was 18 years old at a Catholic high school, and I'm not adequately prepared to stand in front of a class of 30 students and take questions and answer questions that they have. You know how the questions go with students. They ask really deep critical thinking questions, and if my catechesis is not in place, I'm not comfortable doing that. You can ask me anything you want about slope and equations and anything else, but this was going to be tough to do, to kind of open myself up to that. So therefore I didn't quite do as much Catholic identity. Number three, what a huge my misconception, but a huge barrier for people is standardized tests have made it so tough to get anything in there. It's just so tight with getting standards and benchmark testing and everything in there. It's tough to get other things involved, so I'll talk about that misconception as well. And then last, kind of a small thing, but hey, I'm starting class with prayer. Not all of the people on my floor or my neighbors in my classroom, they're not starting with prayer, so maybe that's enough. I feel like I'm going above and beyond what's being expected, or maybe what's the norm, and maybe that was enough Catholic identity. So those are kind of my four misconceptions with it, and I want to share with you kind of a couple of things that maybe will cause those misconceptions to go away, or maybe you still have them as well. This Sacred Congregation for Catholic Education is one of many congregations at the Vatican. There's a congregation for religious life and for the doctrine of faith. And my brother, who is a priest and was also the chaplain at my high school at the time, gave this particular document to me. I originally laughed because, I don't have time to read a Vatican document. They're very dense and deep and takes a lot of unpacking. And it explained everything that my misconceptions had kind of skewed. So this was in October of '82, and this cardinal is actually still alive. He's the longest-serving American cardinal. Cardinal William Baum was the author, along with obviously some people who helped him with this document that was called Lay Catholics in Schools, Witnesses to Faith. And this particular document was written in the 80s. We started to see less religious in the schools, less priests and sisters in the classrooms, and more lay people. And obviously this became kind of a growing trend, and the Vatican responded with this document addressed to lay Catholic teachers in schools, and how we are that new witness to faith. This, I have a link to this at the end of the webinar. An awesome read, very easy to read. It's spoken to an educator. It's just really a fantastic read. But there were four specific things I just want to share with you that kind of address these misconceptions I had. So that first one, hey, look, this is the religion teacher's job. It's not necessarily falling under my job description to do this. That was kind of what I was operating under. I'll take a moment to let you read this excerpt from Lay Catholics in Schools document, from paragraph 16. What I found most important is what is underlined there. We yes, we transmit a body of knowledge. We have math that we are transmitting, for lack of a better word, to students that we're responsible for doing. But that is not it. It's not simply a transmitter of knowledge. There's more to that. We're understood as an actual educator, and we're doing more than transmitting that. Are we responsible for it? Yes. Is there something else there? Yes. And that's to help form human persons, which is what's in paragraph 16. If you have staff members that's kind of their issue, they don't feel like they're called to that, share with them this excerpt. It might help skew them or get them back to maybe being more open to this Catholic identity piece, because it certainly helped me understand that I was being called as more than a teacher. I was an actual educator and helping inform human persons. The second misconception that I had was, I'm not prepared to do this. I hadn't taken religion in a long time, and I wasn't sure I was ready to answer questions from students that they might have. And this really just kind of shot that down. And so, think about how much time you spent getting your teacher's license, or maybe your master's if that's your level, or beyond, of just how much preparation went into that to become a good classroom teacher, from pedagogy to assessment strategies to best practices all across the board. This document, and this isn't my principal saying it, this isn't a priest in my building saying it, this is coming from the Vatican, that this is what we're called to. As the quote said, if it takes time to be a good transmitter of knowledge, then even more preparation is required if we're going to be this genuine teacher that the Vatican is asking us to be. Therefore, I do have to improve my catechesis. I do have to put some time and resources towards understanding this content. Maybe I have to talk to some of the theology teachers about what I'm teaching, to kind of get their perspective. So just keep that in mind as, we think about all the professional growth points and continuing ed that we do to maintain or to be a good classroom teacher. Even more is required. The third misconception was that this concept of standardized tests have just made it impossible to teach anything other than math. And that underlined word, committed, is exactly it. If you want this to be a part of your classroom, it takes commitment. I have never had it just naturally appear Catholic identity in my lessons. It doesn't happen. So it takes a commitment on my end to make this a reality, and certainly commitment on your end as well. And if you've worked towards getting Catholic identity, it's something that you have to plan for and plan well for, because it's not something that happens naturally. But this concept of commitment, and is it worthwhile? And I think the answer is yes, it is. The last misconception there, that starting class with prayer was more than enough. Thought I was doing a heck of a job as a first-year teacher. And this quote again, just as I read this, it just shot that down. I realized I'm called to more. The more completely we can give these students, a witness, a model, that is a better scenario. The more that we can do for them to help kind of model our faith lives. So yes, starting class with prayer is fantastic. Is at the end? No. We can go deeper into our lessons, and that's where we really start to make this Catholic identity start to really sink in. So we're supported all the way in Rome. We're supported in what we're doing. So I bought into that. Hurdle number one there, I felt like, okay, it was kind of an easy thing. Once I read this document and kind of got some good soul searching, if you will, yeah, I need to do this. Well, hurdle number two is why we're here. How do you actually do it? And I think most of us on this webinar, we're here because we have bought into hurdle number one. But number two is actually doing it. Is kind of what we're here to maybe share some best practices and talk about. So before I jump into this Catholic identity, the lesson piece on the right-hand side, I just want to get a quick plug in for the classroom itself. And I just have, I think, like 1 or 2 slides about this. Students walk into our classroom, and right away we have a chance to begin this Catholic identity, getting it in front of the students from the moment they walk in. And see our classroom. And I'd ask you just to kind of think about your particular classroom. And as a good starting point, if someone just walks into your classroom, blindfolded or let in, they open their eyes, and they're in your math classroom, when they look around, would they know that it's a Catholic school? Not if you're a Catholic. You can certainly be non-Catholic and teach at a Catholic school, but is it a Catholic school itself? And picture your own classroom. Maybe you have some things on there that are. My contention and my belief is that we have a good opportunity from the moment they walk in to begin getting these students to understand that this Catholic identity is something important, because it's a visual, and we're such a a sensory-based faith with our sights and sounds and smells of the liturgy, and sacramentals are such a big piece of that. And as the Catechism says, they resemble the sacraments. So this is just a starting point, though. And this is the last slide on it, then I'll get into the lesson, but I think it's important because it's at least something on the surface. Do you have a picture of Pope Francis up there, or a previous Pope? Maybe you like Pope Benedict or the 16th, or JP2's writings, or anything like that that appeals to you. Are those in our classrooms? When a student walks in, they see that. Oh, who is that? Well, that's John Paul II. Do you know who he is? No, I wasn't alive, and those kind of discussions that can take place. Previous popes, saints. What about quotes that are on there? I think when I got my first classroom, I was really excited to get quotes from Einstein and other good kind of secular sources, and attitude determines altitude and things like that. What about quotes from saints, or obviously Blessed Mother Teresa? And I think this quote's something that students can relate to. I kind of put a secular twist on this, but this is a quote in my classroom. God has not called me to be successful, He has called me to be faithful. If you look at that from a mathematical perspective or just school in general, I'm not asking you to get 100%. I'm just asking you to try and keep working and be faithful. And that you can kind of tie that into the Catholic identity, so that this concept of motivation even has a Catholic identity spin to it. And then the last, sacred art. Doubting Thomas is a great one with, so many of our students maybe kind of doubt the direction that we're trying to lead them, or, wow, you're given a lot of homework. This project, there's no way we'll use this in the real world, and this just constant doubt. And it's always kind of a good image of, listen, maybe for us ourselves as teachers, Jesus himself was doubted. It's probably okay that our own students/followers doubt what we're doing too. So Sermon on the Mount, all kinds of sacred art with Jesus teaching is a great resource. But please do not think the point of this webinar is for me to tell you how to decorate your classroom. And please know that I know that any teacher could plaster their wall with this stuff, and that doesn't make it any more Catholic identity. It's just scratching the surface. That's not the point of this. What I want to get into is the actual Catholic identity in the math lesson itself. And the whole thing that I think we need to kind of gear ourselves towards understanding is it has to be integrated. I was given a list of questions when people signed up, and this question came up from so many people, and it's an outstanding question, and it said, how do we make sure Catholic identity in the classroom isn't forced? Right? How do we make sure that it isn't forced? And that is such a great question, because that's the key to all this. The students, they'll sniff this out in a heartbeat if it's not authentic, right? And it's not integrated into the lesson. If you're teaching, we are teaching for 30 minutes, and all of a sudden we slam on the brakes. Oh, hey, let's do this Catholic piece here real quick. They'll know, and they won't care, and it won't have any kind of serious meaning to it. But if it's integrated, which as we kind of go through this, we'll talk about some ways we can make it integrated. That's the approach that we're looking for. So here's an example of poor integration, talking about prime numbers. It's divisible by 1 in itself, and then all of a sudden you're just like in front of the classroom, hey, 7 is a prime number, and then this little light bulb goes off in your head, hey, there's 7 deadly sins, and you tell that to the class, and hey, what great Catholic identity I just put together there. And we know, obviously, the students will leave the classroom and never, ever remember that Mr. Hollowell had a Catholic identity piece, because he said for 3 seconds, there are 7 deadly sins, and that's it. That's not the integration we're looking for, and certainly those kind of things maybe have popped in my head, but I know that that's not what this is all about. What I want to propose to you is perhaps a little better integration, and we'll start with this first lesson that has to do with ellipses in St. Peter's Square. And I know, my gosh, the educators as part of this webinar span the spectrum of K through 12 and probably even beyond. These are just starting points. You can make this anything. This is written towards Algebra 2. You can make it pre-calculus, trigonometry, whatever the standards kind of lead you towards. You can modify as you see fit. But let's look at this integration. So when students walk in, my whole goal with with the Catholic identity is they need to see it, that it's part of the lesson the moment they walk in the classroom. Not the moment the bell rings, but the moment they walk in, so that as they're gathering in their seats and getting things put together, you have something in front of them that right away is speaking to Catholic identity. And in this particular lesson about ellipses in St. Peter's Square, I have this picture, obviously it's blown up, that's on there on the board. If you don't have, a projector, smart board, whatever, you can print off a picture and tape it to your board, whatever the case may be, but it's up there. And the question that's next to it says something effective: do you know where this is, and do you know what this is? And it's just kind of surface questions, and obviously the bell rings, and however you have your class set up, they just kind of start talking about these things, and maybe you give them a piece of paper to write down the answers or whatever the case may be. But the focus is on them for a little bit, and then depending on the amount of time, again, modify as you see fit. You can make this discussion last 5 seconds, or you can make it last 2 minutes or longer. But they're thinking, and all of a sudden they're, oh gosh, I don't know what this has to do with math. Mr. Charles is kind of crazy, but yeah, I've seen that before. I mean, wasn't Pope Francis there? And you kind of get that dialogue going, and maybe there's no one in your classroom that knows what it is, or maybe you've had, students visit it. Who knows? Just kind of run with it. But the important thing is that was up there the moment they walked in. You didn't hit the brakes and stop the math. It's actually the Catholic identity came first. Okay, so that's up there. So that's how this class starts. This image, this brief activity, we're kind of accessing prior knowledge to get a sense of what what they know about this. Okay, and then we shift to the math. And again, you can make this your first lesson on conic sections. If it's your middle, if it's the end, then you want to do kind of a wrap-up project of Catholic or of ellipses, and you have this Catholic identity piece. Whatever the case may be, they're learning about ellipses, of foci and major axes and minor axes, and they're graphing, whatever the case may be. They're learning math, okay? But you're constantly tying things back to this ellipse that they saw in the beginning. And if you, depending on how deep you want to go with this, who's buried at St. Peter's Square, and why is this important, and those kind of things. The third thing, as they've kind of learned about these ellipses a little bit more, is to kind of just briefly go back. Again, if you have 85 minutes, well, maybe you can show, a couple-minute video about how the construction of St. Peter's Square. You can get in the history side of it. I kind of tend to keep that at about a minute, just to kind of, okay, let's look again at how this ellipse, what's so important about this ellipse. Why is that St. Peter's Square filled with hundreds of thousands of people at the time? How was it constructed? All those kind of things. Then going back to the math, they'll graph St. Peter's Square. Again, run wild with the technology. You can use graphing calculators to online graphing to anything, you name it. At some point, though, if you're teaching conic sections, my guess is, you're given an equation. And on this, normally if I'm doing an ellipse without this, I just give them some random, the major axis is 20 units. Well, on this, it's like, all right, the major axis is 680, meters, and the minor axis of St. Peter's Square, and so forth. So it's in front of them again, and it's just constant, this St. Peter's Square thing won't go away in their minds. And then at the end, I think it's really important that we start with this Catholic identity. It's part of the lesson in the middle, and then at the end, as some form of closure or student-centered, exit ticket, whatever the case may be, is to go back to this and say, okay, let's write this equation for the ellipse at St. Peter's Square. The particular lesson plan I have that I'll share with you, it gets it's a suggested way of making that, where they, I believe it's like they prove the formula, or they look at area. You can go to town with whatever you want, but the important thing is you look at this lesson compared to what I just had up there. 7 is a prime number, and there are 7 deadly sins, and that's the best I could do. That's obviously not quite the integration that we're looking for in this particular lesson. The kind of the issue that I talked about before with not being maybe comfortable being the one on the stage talking about this. If you're not, I think the best thing to do if you don't want to be that kind of sage on the stage is using media to supplement our catechesis or even our knowledge of something. And the video clips, I think you can all agree that the shorter, the more succinct video clips, the better, and not, a 10-minute documentary, just this short stuff that kind of, gets to the point, but then now we're back to doing some other things. There is so much you can do to implement this, and I'm going to show you a video here that's only a minute long in just a second to have to actually supplement our knowledge of the Catholic faith, and just so students can hear it from someone else, I think is a good thing to do. This particular lesson is Pope Francis gave an interview that was somewhat controversial, I guess, in what he named, and this lesson kind of tails on the interview that he gave. So this particular lesson, before I show the video, what I start with this is just a picture of Pope Francis, and off to the side, the work that they're supposed to do as soon as they walk in is Pope Francis recently said that two of the greatest evils in the world are blank and blank. Okay, so I leave underlined spaces there. So again, Pope Francis recently said that two of the greatest evils in the world are blank and blank. Okay, again, you can make this discussion 5 minutes long. You can make it as quick as you need to. So we talked about all kinds of things, and when I first heard it, you think, all right, abortion, to poverty, to suicide, you name the issues, surely that's it. Okay, I'm going to let students talk about it. But that's up there the moment they walk in, and that discussion's kind of going on. Well, what do you think our Holy Father thinks are the two greatest evils? One of the, he later on says, but we watch this video, and I don't want to ruin the ending, but it's youth unemployment is his first greatest evil, and then the second one is the loneliness of the old. So the greatest evil is youth unemployment and loneliness of the old. But I don't tell students that. I say, okay, well, those are all great suggestions that you named. Let's hear what Pope Francis said, the two of the greatest evils of the world are. So I'm going to play this video clip. It's only a minute long, and we'll kind of talk about it here in just a second.
Pope Francis broke with tradition on Monday by greeting journalists one by one on the papal plane en route to his first international visit, but said he would not answer questions. The pontiff, traveling to Brazil for a 7-day trip primarily to lead the Mass for World Youth Day, came back to meet the media shortly after taking off from Rome's Fiumicino airport. Pope Francis says he's concerned by the rising number of youth unemployed over the world.
It's true that the world crisis is not treating young people well. I read last week about the high percentage of youth who are without work. We are running the risk of having a generation that does not have work. From work comes the dignity of the person to earn his bread. Young people in this moment are in crisis.
A United Nations agency reported in January that jobless numbers around the world could hit record levels this year, rising to as high as 200 million people.
Okay, certainly a quick video clip, and much different than me standing up there, hey, guess what, the greatest evils in the world are this, this, and this. No, it came from Pope Francis himself. So I think that just helps us maybe become a little more comfortable with this, because now it's not us telling them what the greatest evils are. It's actually just letting Pope Francis say it and just kind of moving to be that guide on the side that facilitates this. Okay, so I eventually give them this handout, and I think it's important to have that quote on there in front of them at all times. So this is an Algebra 1 lesson, but you can make this apply to all different kinds of math content areas, and it's good. I like that the quote's on there because they understand that this is something that is not just, we watch the video and now it's over. It's in front of them as they're working on this paper. The task for the students, as you can see on there, it says plot this data on graph paper, and this is in Algebra 1, so kind of beginning Algebra 1, scatter plots and trend lines, positive correlation, negative correlation, all that good stuff. And depending on the time, you can leave the data blank for them and make this more kind of a web quest where they're given the website and they need to do the research themselves, or you can make it an assignment the night before of kind of a hey, do this research, bring in the numbers, we'll look, we'll compare and see. But long story short, at some point there's the data and the years, and then the unemployment rate in Italy. You can look at it from the United States, you can look at it from other countries, whatever the case may be. But they plot this data, okay? And normally when I did before, this lesson, I would give them, time practicing free throws and your free throw percentage. I would, make up a data set and give it to them. And that was it, and there's nothing wrong with that data. It's just, what if we supplemented that with actual Catholic data or Catholic identity data? And we are, in Indiana, we were a Common Core state for about a year, and then we are now one of the states that rewrote, and I use air quotes around that, our own standards. And we were an audit was performed twice on Indiana standards, and it was discovered that 80% of our standards are verbatim Common Core standards. And if you're out there and you're in a similar state, you can probably relate to what I'm saying. Is they weren't just the same concepts, it was cut and paste, the same thing. So I consider ourselves a Common Core state, just not in name. So we're the Indiana College and Career Readiness Standards, but you'll read them and see their remarkable similarities to Common Core. My thing with data that is so huge with Common Core is that there's an entire domain on statistics and probability that starts in grade 6 and runs through 12th grade. That's huge. The fact that Common Core and Indiana, using our own standards, has that emphasis on data, statistics, and probability. The other piece of Common Core that I think that is just absolutely huge is the standards for mathematical practice, the 8 standards that students need to have mastered and work on at all times. Standard number 4, model with mathematics. That one applies from kindergarten through 12th grade. In Indiana, we changed the name on those. We kept all 8 of them, and they're called the process standards, Indiana process standards, but they are verbatim the same thing. But that modeling with mathematics strand, it says explicitly students need to have access to data that applies to everyday life and society. Well, forget the free throw percentage stuff. This data, there's a Catholic identity piece to it, and it's still doing the same math, but I think it's really helpful. So they get to plot this and confirm or refute Pope Francis's claim in his interview. And then depending on the time, I think what I have kind of a triple asterisk down below there is the Catholic social teaching that gets into, well, why is this a problem? Okay, yeah, 15-year-old does not have a job, right? I didn't have a job as a freshman. Why is that a big deal? Okay, maybe at 15 it's not as big a deal, but as you start to move on and you see this, what's italicized down there, this is from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. They're writing on the dignity of work, and Pope Francis says it in that video clip, from work comes dignity. Right? And this is a handout given to students, and this is all on there. So they're plotting data. This is on there. Depending on the time you have, you can tie in that discussion. What do you guys think about this? What if let's make a prediction? Let's use our trend line, predict what the unemployment rate is in 2025 if it stays linear. Is this an issue? Do you think Pope Francis is right on this? So all kinds of things you can do with that. Particular lesson, you can model this. If you go back far enough, you can look and see if it fits more a trig model, a trigonometric model, or maybe a quadratic model. Or if you're not even to that point, you can just have kids that are students, just plotting XY points and just kind of going from there. An excellent place to start is the USCCB. There's 7 themes of Catholic social teaching, and they're all kind of grouped together. I think when I started with Catholic identity, my whole thing was, okay, well, let's work in the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit. Let's work in, Scripture. Gosh, I'll find some Scripture passages with numbers in there. What about the Beatitudes and like Catholic dogma, I guess, that I want to share with them. this, I have found these 7 themes is the absolute best place to start, because these things are all relevant to the students. Not that what I listed isn't relevant, but this is the stuff they know. They know about poor and vulnerable people. They know about, God's creation. They know about life and dignity of the human person. This is the stuff that gets their interest piqued a little bit. So I just have a couple things, or one from each one of these themes I could just kind of point you towards that might kind of give you an idea of something to pursue. With life and dignity of the human person, certainly we're in the midst of a 40 Days for Life right now. What a great opportunity to look at data that surrounds abortion trends or anything in regards to life and dignity of the human person. It's rich with data that you can make meaningful for students and model. If you're a Common Core state and you've got that process standard, or the standard for mathematical practice of modeling with mathematics, it's just rich with opportunity. The second one, call to family, community, and participation. A lot of this has been in the news lately with the replacement rate of society, that we need 2.1 children to advance and to actually have our society move on. If we don't, we're not replacing ourselves, and we're actually dying off. And there's all kinds of good math that you can do with that. You can make it super complex, or you can, just kind of entry level, but all kinds of good stuff. Rights and responsibilities. There's, you can look at food distribution and how that's done in third world countries, from mapping to plotting data to modeling data. Option for the poor and vulnerable. My guess is many of you at some point, if you're teaching anything with statistics or more probability in an Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Pre-Calc, you probably at some point are doing something with lottery odds, and looking at maybe permutations and combinations and how that works. That comes up into play. And I would always use that lesson, but there's a whole other piece to that with Catholic identity. Okay, we find these odds, they're astronomical. Well, let's look at these zip codes in our area where advertising dollars are spent the most. Guess what? It's not the affluent zip codes. Let's talk about this option for the poor and vulnerable. Let's look at what the bishops say about this. Is that something that the Catholic Church supports, or is it something that they speak out against? So that's something certainly rich for some math. Dignity of work and the rights of workers, minimum wage, you see it all the time. Let's lower it, let's raise it. Can we do some math behind that? They all know what minimum wage is. It's just giving a little bit of Catholic identity with, well, let's tie this to what the Church says about the dignity of work and the rights of workers. I'm not asking you to make a case for being raised or lowered. It's just tying it in to Catholic identity and to what the Church says. And then, now we've got an awesome lesson. Solidarity, the effects of wars on populations, economies, certainly can go to town with that theme of Catholic social teaching. And then it's listed number 7 from USCCB, but care for God's creation. If you're looking for just a really good starting place within these 7 themes, they know about pollution. They know about God's creation. They see that stuff in the news all the time, from animals to plants and trees and our waterways. You can do all that great stuff and then just tie it back to, well, what does the Church say about how do we take care of God's creation? Let's look at what the USCCB says in regards to this, or what, that is a resource. What does the Church say? So that's a great starting place for sure, if you're looking for just something that's maybe, I don't want to say controversial, but, probably won't cause students to, question too much stuff. Moving forward to assessments, this was one of the objectives of the seminar. You think about, or the webinar, the question students always ask, is this on the test? As you're taking notes, as we're doing anything, learning something new, is this on the test? Is this on the test? Okay, that lesson that I have right there, the 7 is a prime number and it's 7 deadly sins, that's really tough to assess the Catholic identity piece. Okay, but students want to know if it's on the test, because if we say yes, then it's important to them. Now, of course, I would love for them to think that anything I say is important in my classroom, but sometimes they want that clarifying statement of, well, it's on the test. Okay, this is important. When we share with them up front that yes, you will be assessed on this. Not, do you believe Catholic dogma that I'm teaching you, or that I'm presenting to you? Not that, because our school itself, we are 79% Catholic. at least 21% are non-Catholic. I am most certainly not asking those 21% of the non-Catholic students to, believe, the faith that I'm teaching. What I'm asking them to do is, can they say what happens at St. Peter's Square? Who's buried there? What is the importance of St. Peter's Square to the Catholic Church? With Pope Francis, I'm not asking them to believe that he is, Christ's representative on earth. I'm asking, what did Pope Francis say was one of the two greatest evils? Why did he say that? Then, no matter what faith background you have, you can answer that. That's what I'm asking students. So please know, if you have non-Catholic students, I'm sure you all do, that we're not trying to convert. I guess in the end, maybe that would be wonderful, but that's not the point of these lessons. We're not asking students to be uncomfortable. We're just sharing with them Catholic teaching, and if they want to digest that later on their own, they can. But back to this assessment, if it's not on there, it won't stick with them. So at the end of class, maybe at the end of unit test, maybe even on your final exam, that Pope Francis data question I have that's at the end of my Chapter 1 test, it's on the final exam, and we end up doing it a second time when we look at quadratic data. So it's in front of them, and we just keep revisiting this stuff over and over and over so that it stays in front of them. And to them, whether we like it or not, if it's on the test, it's important. So keep that in mind as a way of moving forward. If we're going to take this serious, let's assess it as well. Okay, just two real quick things before I get to the end. Things that have come up. I guess this is more tips for you if you're kind of looking to go down this route. At some point, students have brought up to me, especially when you do stuff with Pope Francis quotes or anything like that. Well, Mr. Hollowell, the Catholic Church, more importantly the Pope, was wrong before. And I teach physics, so I'll bring up that a lot in physics class. Well, they were wrong on Galileo. What's to say they're right on this youth unemployment thing? Maybe there's something going on there too that we shouldn't believe. And you know what? It's a great question. So I have made it a point to kind of prepare myself, and I put all caps here so this is a phenomenal reference for answering that. And what the second line there, immediately skip to Chapter 5. A great, easy to read description of the actual account of kind of the Catholic Church's stance with Galileo. Does the Catholic Church hate science and reason? Because that's kind of, the math minds of, oh gosh, those are two separate things. Chapter 5 addresses all of it. And I just put a quote on there at the bottom from Pope Urban that actually showered Galileo with gifts and celebrated his cause, put time and resources towards helping confirm what he had observed. And, I think modern day we think, well, the church instantly tried to shut him down, and that's not the case. So if you have students that are like, really doubting the authenticity of anything you're saying because of Galileo hundreds of years ago, arm yourself. Be prepared for that, because I'm certain that it will eventually come up, especially if you start to get kind of deeper into this. The other thing that I found that comes up a lot, and especially it happens in some of the honors classes where maybe the students are really deep thinkers, is they'll look at faith, the Catholic identity, conflicting with the reason. So it's this like epic battle, and as the Time magazine cover there, it's God versus science, and that's how sometimes my students think of it as. Well, this excerpt from the Catechism is a wonderful job of describing that's not true. Faith comes from God, reason comes from God, and therefore they can't contradict each other. And I share that with them. I'm not asking them to believe it. I'm not asking them to, be on board with it. But I'm saying, well, here's what the church teaches about it. Faith and reason were both created by God, therefore they can't contradict each other. So that's something to keep in mind if this comes up. And then the last book, if I can put a plug in for, was also $13, oddly enough, is St. Albert the Great has tons of writings about faith and reason. And as a math teacher, if you're looking for just a good read, this is as well another one that you can really kind of arm yourself to be prepared to, answer those questions students have of, well, math certainly, doesn't that conflict with us? The Catholic faith. No, it doesn't. Faith and reason work together. So something to consider if you're looking to kind of give yourself a little catechesis. All right, 2 closing points, and I'll share with you the resources, and we'll open up for questions. First closing point, so important that we address this. Not everything has to have Catholic identity to it. I've been doing this for a long time. I still have lessons that don't have a Catholic identity piece. Okay? And you look at this polynomial long division, I have yet to see a good lesson plan that ties Catholic identity into this. One of the questions beforehand that was sent in was, what about, how can you be specific about integrating logarithms with Catholic identity? And that's kind of my response. You know what? There's probably some good stuff that you can do with data if you're going to look at logarithmic models, perhaps, as that gets into, kind of some upper level math. But please know that the point of this webinar is not to have you try and create, 180 school days worth of lessons that are rich with Catholic identity. It's not possible. What I'm asking you to do, I'm suggesting that start with one. Get one Catholic identity lesson. Find something, and it's the one that you're most passionate about. If one of those 7 themes, like, oh gosh, I really feel tied to this care for God's creation, go with it, because if you're passionate about it, it'll spill over into the lesson, and then the students, pick up on that, and it's a lot more meaningful. Just get one. If you co-teach with somebody, put your heads together. Hey, I want something that has to do with this dignity of workers. Where are we at in our lesson? Where can we make this fit? And kind of go from there. That's the point of this. If you try and do it all, that's the easiest way to fail. So please don't think I'm lobbying for that in the least. Okay, second closing point, and I'll show you the resources, is another excerpt from Lay Catholics in Schools. Never doubt that we are supported by something greater than our principal or our school board or our parents. The Catholic Church is actually relying on us as educators to be a great hope for the church. And as you run into these, problems of lesson planning and finding time and how do you make this work, and maybe I tried it once and it didn't go over well, the church is relying on us to do that. For our students, for the church, to be an element of great hope. And I take great comfort in that when I fail on something with this, or I'm thinking, you know what, it'd be just a lot easier to show a problem where they're just graphing a line and not do this Catholic identity piece. The church kind of says, no, this is important. So those are my 2 closing points. Hopefully, that'll maybe alleviate some qualms you may have. The last page I have in here is a couple resources, and this first link, I'm going to click on this so you can see this will be the premier website for getting great lesson plans for Catholic identity. Over the summer, this past summer, 2013 or 2014, we had a group of educators, the NCEA, put together from kindergarten through 12th grade in Louisville, Kentucky, all math teachers writing lessons that had Catholic identity integrated into them. A 3-day conference workshop that got educators together and working through those. Those lessons that were created are in the process of being vetted, and then this will be the clearinghouse, I guess, the location, the source for all of these lessons. Right now, it has English language arts on there. That was the first one that NCEA chose to go with to get on here. It's listed as early 2015. As soon as this is live with math lessons, I'll certainly tweet it out. I'm sure NCEA will do a great job at this Catholic identity curriculum integration. I think that's what we're all here for. Give me lessons. Where can I go to click on these things? There's a lot of good resources on here already, but if you're looking for math lessons, be on the lookout. Early 2015, so hopefully, we'll be after that, pretty soon to have that to share with you guys. The second one, I just put the link on here for that Lay Catholics in Schools Witnesses to Faith document. It's a great document, and I'm not someone that reads papal documents. I just don't do that. This one is awesome. As an educator, it's something certainly worth kind of getting your hands on. It's just so timely to read that. And then the last one, the 2 specific lesson plans, these are also being vetted and hopefully, in some capacity will be on the website, the CICIonline.org website. If you'd like to get your hands on them now, you can download them tonight, I think, or early tomorrow morning. The webinar Dropbox will have the PowerPoint slides that are on here, but then also 2 PDFs. Those PDFs are, as you see them, you can modify them any way you see fit. We tried to include things like accommodations for students, assessments, how could you modify the lesson for ellipses in St. Peter's Square to different content areas. How about Pope Francis and youth unemployment? Could we make that a 7th and 8th grade lesson? Well, what if I want to make it a calculus lesson? Holy cow, you can just go to town with that. If you want those, I can email them to you. If you wait until this Dropbox is ready to go here in the next 12 hours, you can also find them there. If you ever have anything you want to send to me to look at, by all means shoot me an email and send it. I'd love to take a look at what you're doing as well. But those resources are certainly a good place to start for those, along with those 7 themes of Catholic social teaching. Other than that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate, our moderator, to facilitate any kind of question and answers, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you do have.
Great. First one is, do you have any suggestions or ideas for someone who's teaching a 3rd or 4th grade math class?
Yes, so I'm a high school teacher, obviously, and I've not taught 3rd and 4th grade. At the workshop itself, in the summer, there was an entire section of, it was like kindergarten through 2nd grade, 3rd through 5th grade, 5th through 7th grade, and so forth. And I was part of the high school group. They all have these lessons that they've put together most definitely address any age group that you're looking for, and they all have this Catholic identity piece, and they'll also be vetted, and so you're getting a really good product. Honestly, with if I'm going to start with a 3rd and 4th grade, I would jump into the more care for God's creation Catholic social teaching. I think that's one that all students can relate to, regardless of their age level, and kind of go to town. I'm not super familiar with 3rd and 4th grade standards, but I'd be more than happy to kind of take a look at them and see. But I think you're going to be pleased here, hopefully next couple of weeks with the lesson plans that are on there for that grade level. So. Look forward to having those for sure.
Okay, great. And then, you mentioned before you don't have to make 100% of your lesson plans incorporate Catholic identity, but what would you think is a good balance that could be struck between, the math curriculum and how many lessons have Catholic identity pieces within them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the first time, the first year that I kind of started working on this, I followed that advice of I wanted one lesson that I could just really, say, okay, I'm proud of this lesson. This is something that's good. So I think in those first years, I would not, however long it takes, I would not look at it as, how many can I get together? It's, can I get one that is, I feel like is a good product, and can I modify that and work on it? I think what you find, and what I found, is the more of these that I implement, the easier it becomes to do them, and I never once look at it as something that slows down the curriculum in my class. I teach a pre-AP class that the curriculum is, it's like every 5 minutes is planned out for me from August to May, and I still do the stuff, and it doesn't slow that curriculum down. It's just I'm integrating it with it. So I don't know, obviously there's not a right answer or right number amount, but if I can just encourage you to think about getting 1 and then 2, and then if this leads you to being able to have a couple a week, that's awesome. If you never get to that point, that's awesome as well. At least you're trying and you're committing yourself to being an educator that the Catholic Church is asking us to become.
Okay, and last question is, I love these questions. You can tell they're from math teachers because it's percentages and fractions and questions like that. But a specific question is, maybe any visual references or hands-on ideas or suggestions for students in the 6th grade, probably middle school range?
Gosh, if I understand the question correctly, visual technology, I guess I'm going to kind of answer it that way since we're kind of in webinar format and I can't have them completely clarify. I found that definitely, getting the kids graphing this data and using that whether it's Excel, graphing these in Microsoft Excel or whatever type of open software on Google Sheets or whatever the case may be. If they have graphing calculators at 7th and 8th grade, whenever they come in, I find that using graphing calculators to do that, to kind of start to manipulate the data itself, or honestly to make it so that it's more the onus is put on the students, the visual side of stuff, the data, and any type of lesson that goes along with it. Sometimes it's, hey, go find a video that addresses whatever this particular Catholic social teaching is. One of the lessons that I got to be a part of that was a very visual-based lesson had to do with students using equations or linear equations to create stained glass windows in a church. And the lesson kind of started with, well, why do we even have stained glass windows? You have these Catholic churches, yeah, they're beautiful, but where'd they come from? So there was like a little 1 or 2 minute video explain kind of the Catholic Church's love of stained glass windows. And then so the visual piece was, they were actually making them by graphing the line y equals 2x, and then the line this, and kind of got into graphing horizontal lines and vertical lines. But students were creating awesome stained glass windows, and that's one of the lessons that will appear here in early 2015. So definitely a visual feel to that lesson. And at a 6th grade level, you can definitely kind of manipulate that a little bit as as you see fit, for sure.
Okay. Well, I think we're coming close to the end of our time together. You offered before, but I believe the offer still stands that you're receiving emails for folks who might have any follow-up questions.
Absolutely, yes. Email away. I'd be more than happy to respond and look forward to the dialogue for sure.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Matt.